There is a village on the east coast of Sri Lanka. It has no traffic lights, the roads are mostly sand. In the evening, fishing boats come in across the bay and catch goes directly from the nets to the restaurants on the shore. It is by most measures a quiet place. And it is also right now one of the most talked about surf destinations on the planet, Arugam Bay. Locals call it A Bay. Surfers rank it among the world's greatest waves, and the extraordinary thing is, barely 50 years ago, nobody outside a very small circle even knew this place existed. I'm Christina, and this is the story of how a forgotten fishing village on a war-torn coastline became one of the world's most celebrated surf destinations. Arugam Bay is located on the southeastern tip of Sri Lanka, 6 kilometers south of the regional town of Potuville, at the end of the road that crosses the island through elephant country and dry jungle. It sits on the Bay of Bengal, facing directly into the Indian Ocean swells that roll in from the southeast between April and October. The surf season here lines up perfectly with the southwest monsoon on the other side of the island, which means when the popular beaches of Hikudava and Veligama are being battered by rain, Arugam Bay is clean, warm, and fiery. The main break, simply called Main Point, is a long right-hand reef break that can deliver rides of 200 to 500 meters on a good swell. To its north, Whiskey Point, Potterville Point. To its south, Peanut Farm, Elephant Rock, the remote jungle back breaks of Okanda and Panama. This coastline is not one wave. This is a whole menu, and for 50 years, the world barely knew it was there. The story of surfing in Sri Lanka starts like so many surf stories, with a group of wandering Australians who couldn't afford to go to Bali. It was the early 1970s. The hippie trail, the overland route from Europe through Iran, India, and Southeast Asia, was at its peak. Surfers had already found Goa. They had already found Bali, and a small number of them, drifting further, found their way to Sri Lanka. The island then was called Ceylon. And on the south coast, at a beach called Hikkaduwa, they found waves. Two Australian surfers, Bruce Weller and Dave Fisher, arrived in Hikkaduwa in 1973. They liked it so much they married two sisters from the village and kept coming back. Word spread quietly through the East Coast surf community in Australia, mostly through letters and occasional magazine mention. And by the late 1970s, a small, dedicated circuit of Australian, Italian, and French surfers was making the pilgrimage to Sri Lanka each season. Getting to Arugam Bay in those days was itself an adventure. The CTB bus, the national bus service, could take 3 days of breakdowns and missed connections. When you finally arrived, there were no hotels, a government circuit bungalow, some thatched homestays, no electricity, no running water. 5 rupees for a bed and dinner, rice and curry, roti and tea. The bay was a fishing village with coconut trees and wooden boats on the sand. And the waves, perfect, uncrowded, barely touched. Arugam Bay in those years was a secret, the kind of secret that surfers carry quietly for years. Because once too many people know, the thing you loved about it starts to disappear. And for a long time, the secret kept itself, not through any deliberate efforts to hide it, but because of something that would shape the next 3 decades of Sri Lankan history. In 1983, the civil war between the Sri Lankan government and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the Tamil Tigers, began. Arugam Bay sits in the eastern province, a region that saw some of the most intense fighting. The road to A Bay became unsafe. Tourism collapsed. The world moved on to other waves, and the village and its extraordinary break was effectively closed to the outside world for nearly 30 years. Not entirely closed. A handful of committed surfers, some of them the same Australians who had first discovered it, kept coming even during the worst years of the conflict. There is something particular about the devotion of a surfer to a great wave. But for most of the outside world, Arugam Bay simply stopped existing. The main point kept breaking season after season into an empty lineup. The Civil War ended in May 2009, after 26 years, and almost immediately the surfers came back. But by the time they arrived, Arugam Bay had already been through something else. In December 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami struck the eastern coast of Sri Lanka with devastating force. Arugam Bay was directly in its path. The village was largely destroyed. Hundreds of people died in the wider region. What the war had spared, the wave had taken. But what happened next says something about both the resilience of the community and the pull of this particular place. Aid workers came from Australia, Europe, North America to help with reconstruction. Some of them were surfers. They paddled out at Main Point, experienced the wave, and did not leave. Surf schools appeared, guest houses were built, the Surfing Federation of Sri Lanka was formally established in 2017, and in 2011, Arugam Bay hosted the world's first ever World Surf League qualifying series event. Competitors from 24 nations, international television, Sri Lanka on the global surf map for the first time, officially. This event was significant for more than surfing. It was a signal to Sri Lankans, to the tourism industry, to the world, that the eastern coast was open again. That Arugam Bay was not just a break for hardcore travelers willing to endure 3-day bus journey and no electricity, it was a world-class destination. Main Point, Whiskey Point, Potterville Point, the name started appearing in surf magazines, on surf forecasting websites, in the shortlist of the world's greatest right-handers. And the numbers followed. Surf schools, surf camps, surf hotels multiplied along the bay's thin strip of sand. A-Bay developed its own distinct flavor. Part backpacker haven, part surf camp, part yoga retreat, set against a backdrop of lagoons, national parks, and the occasional wild elephant crossing the road at dusk. The Surfing Federation held the first Sri Lankan National Surf Championship in 2018. The winner went on to compete at the 2019 World Surfing Games in Japan, the first time Sri Lanka had ever sent a delegation to the World Surfing Games. A country that had had no surf identity 10 years earlier was now competing on the international stage. But here is a part of the story that I think matters more than any event, and it starts with a knock on the door. In 2011, a woman named Shamali Sanjaya was at home in Arugam Bay when her new neighbor knocked on her door. The neighbor was Tiffany Carruthers, an American surfer from California who had moved to the village as a volunteer with an organization called Surfing the Nations. Carruthers asked Sanjaya if she wanted to learn to surf. Sanjaya came from a surfing family. Her father had taught surfing. Her brother was a national surf champion. She had watched the ocean her whole life, and she had never been allowed in it not to surf. Because in Arugam Bay, as in much of Sri Lanka, the lineup was for men and for female tourists, not for local women. Sanjaya agreed. She went to the beach. Her cousin pushed her onto a wave. She stood up on the first try. I felt, she said later, like I was conquering the world. But the reaction at home was less triumphant. Her brother, a national surf champion, told her it was not their culture for women to surf, that she should stay inside and do the cooking and cleaning. When he caught her in the lineup, he would stand on the beach and hit the ground with a stick, signaling her to get out of the water immediately. So Sanjaya surfed in secret. Early mornings before he was awake, lunchtimes when he was in another village. Session by session, wave by wave, getting better. In 2015, Carruthers organized the first public Girls Makes Waves event at Arugam Bay, a day to teach local women to surf. She teamed up with 2 Australian surfers she'd met at a summit in Bali, Sarah Yani Sons and Janice Walker. Sanjaya and Carothers went door to door in the village beforehand, asking parents for permission. Over 30 local women came to that first event. The backlash was swift. Within weeks, Carothers was summoned by a local official. He told her she was trying to change Sri Lankan culture, that girls in Sri Lanka don't serve, that if she wanted to help local families, she should give them sewing machines. But Carothers and Sanjaya did not stop. We told them, "We never do anything that disrespects our culture," Sanjaya explained. "We don't wear bikinis, we don't drink. It's just about getting into the waves." In 2018, when the Surfing Federation of Sri Lanka finally had the structure to support it, Sanjaya and Carothers co-registered the Arugam Bay Girls Surf Club, the first all-female surf club in Sri Lanka history. Its members ranged in age from 13 to 44. They were from fishing village of Sina Ula next to Abe. They were mothers, school students, working women. "Whenever I hit the waves," Shamali Sanjaya has said, "I feel like I am conquering the world." She said it first about that very first wave her cousin pushed her onto. But she has gone on saying it ever since. Because for her, and for every woman who has followed her into the lineup at Arugam Bay, that is exactly what it was. There's something about waves. No matter who you are or where you come from, they make you feel small for a moment, and then somehow bigger than yourself. Arugam Bay has had its own waves. Discovery, war, tsunami, recovery, reinvention. Just like life, it has risen, fallen, and risen again. But the greatest wave here wasn't in the ocean. It was the one that gave people the courage to change their own lives. For Shamali, it meant freedom. For a new generation of girls, it meant possibility. Maybe that's what great waves really do. They don't just carry surfers, they carry communities forward. I'm Christina for RTV Global Network. Aya Bowen.